416 podcast. This is the interview series, and today we are sitting down with Riley Nelson, a good friend of ours and a mentor of mine and a father figure to me, and one who has truly helped me as far as a gospel preacher, but even to be a better Christian. So I'm thankful for Riley sitting down with us and taking some time. And so just take a moment, if you will, and introduce yourself and tell us about your role in the congregation here and where we are.
Okay. I'm Riley Nelson. My family, I'm married to the former Susie and Montgomery. We have two sons. Andrew, who is married to Ada, a lady from Panama, and they have one daughter, Grace. Andrew preaches for the Homerville congregation and has preached for the last 19 years. Mark, my younger son, is married to the former Ashley Ford, and they have one son who is 13 and a daughter who is 2. I told them they were crazy. But he is a forensic detective here in town, and she is a banker. We've lived in Richmond Hill since 1991. I'm the minister here, the first full-time minister they had, and so we've been here a little over 32 years about, I think it is. I'm now one of the elders here, and Richmond Hill is in southeast Georgia. We're 17 miles south of Savannah, Georgia. We have been inundated, I will say, with hurricanes of the last 3-4 weeks, months, and but we're just a little town on the coast.
And being a coastal town, you have to deal with those hurricanes occasionally, or at least floodwaters and such as that. So,
but it did give us opportunity to help 250 homes, which are now contacts.
That's great.
So we'll be working on that the next few months.
All right, that's great. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too here in just a moment. I want to talk about the Memphis School of Preaching for a moment, because I know we're both alumnus of the Memphis School of Preaching. And so tell us about when you went to school, and maybe give us a little bit of a highlight of that time and what you might recommend to someone thinking about going to the school.
All right. Well, I went to the Memphis School of Preaching when it was hard. It was a great time in my life. I'd always wanted to preach. Didn't plan on going to the Memphis School of Preaching. My wife suggested we look at it when we were on vacation. Her parents, who lived just a few miles from there, so we went up there and looked at it. And 3 months later, I was in the School of Preaching. So, but it was a great 2 years experience, because it's a utopia. 2 years surrounded by Christians. Now, I'd been out of school for a while. Most of my class hadn't. And the instructors are tough, or they were in those days. I know they are now too. But I was able to look at the instructors as people who loved us. Mm-hmm. And as tough as they might be, as hard on us as it seemed, they still loved us. And they were going to help us get through those things. In fact, my youngest son was born as we were studying the book of Acts. He was born, and I missed a week of school. And we had a final in Acts. And Brother John Renshaw was a tough teacher. And he gave me the test, and I took it. This is a day or two after we'd had the baby. And I turned it in, and a couple days later, he said, "Nelson, here's your test back." And I had an A on the test. And I began to look through it, and first page, I missed 6 questions. Second page, I'd missed 6 questions. And I went to his office. I said, "Brother Renshaw," I said, "I got an A on this." He said, "You did?" I said, "Yes, sir. That's what you gave me." I said, "But I missed a bunch of questions." He said, "Nelson, did your wife have a baby this week?" "Yes, sir." "Get out of my office." So, they were fair. And if you were working, trying, they helped you.
And that was our experience as well too. Just being there, they want you to succeed,
Right.
and so they're going to help you every way possible to make that a reality for you, because we need gospel preachers, obviously.
Sure.
And we talked about that yesterday a little bit, but obviously they want you to do the work, they want you to be working, and if you'll put the effort in, they're going to make sure that you're able to get through the school, and it is tough. And it may be tougher for us than the newest guys going through. I have to say it too, even though I came through much later than you. That's just a thing that we do. But
somebody looking to go to the school though needs to understand you've only got 2 years.
Yeah.
To get the work done.
Yeah.
And you think, wow, you're studying 8 hours in class, 8 hours out of class, and this is just crazy. Well, wait till you get out here working.
Right.
There's some weeks where you're not going to have time to turn around because you've got to go visit this family or that family. Somebody's in the hospital, and you've still got sermons to get up, and you've got classes to study for. So they're really preparing you to get ready for the work that's really the work.
Right. And a lot of those things are designed for that very purpose. The difficulty, the rules that you go by, I always try to tell people, look, there's obviously, if you go to any school, there's rules and regulations, things you got to follow while you're in school. But those things also help you to know that when I get out, I'm going to be organized. When I get out, I'm going to, when I go to a congregation, the elders are going to ask of me certain things, and I'm going to need to perform my duties, the best of my ability. And so all those things are designed to help you get into that mindset of doing this work and doing the best work that we possibly can, I think.
That's right.
So when I think about, and you had some instructors that I didn't get to have, Brother Renshaw was one that you mentioned. Who's some of the others?
Brother Mosier was one of the instructors.
Sure.
Of course, he's still there, and he was just beginning to teach. I think it was maybe his second full year of teaching.
Yeah.
And he was tough. He was really tough. Brother Whitaker was there. He taught preaching his work. He's the one that taught me really that you don't have to write down every word a professor says to take proper notes.
Yeah.
I thought you did.
I thought that's what copious meant.
That's what copious. Write them all down. And then
one I was thinking about that you might have, Brother McNutt.
Yeah, Brother McNutt was special too. He taught a couple of classes for us. Now he was getting towards his last few years of teaching. One of the things I remember about him is he had a copy of one of our textbooks that was like the first or second edition. And the book we got was the 7th edition. But he was teaching us from his book.
Right.
But he was a good instructor. I love the book about him, the humor.
Yeah.
He just had so many special things to teach us. And probably one of my favorite instructors was Brother Curry. Brother Curry would go on Bible land trips, and Brother Dearman also told me one time, he said, we went on a trip with Brother Curry, and then, of course, you've got a guide telling you about the trip, and Brother Curry started talking, and the guide just sat down and let Brother Curry direct the trip. So it was great to be in the class, and that gave us a lot of practical experience. Brother Curry taught me patience with the congregation. He said, you're not going to change a congregation overnight. He said, you may go to a congregation that's other people say that's not a good congregation to go to. You don't want to go there. He said, you go, you teach the Bible, and you have patience with them, because if you don't go, who's going to go?
Right.
And that made sense to me. So
absolutely,
I learned to have patience with congregations.
Well, and thinking about the congregation here and the work here, and I know you're serving also as an elder. You mentioned that. You've been here 32 years. Is that somewhere in that time frame?
24, 91.
Whatever that math is.
4 minus 1 is 3. So October 3rd was my anniversary date of starting here.
Wow. That's great. And obviously longevity in a congregation means so much, when you start thinking about the work, and, you've been here for births and deaths and everything, and seeing a lot of those young people grow up, and a lot of those young people we've that were at camp with us now, married, and their young people are going to camp too. And so I know having that longevity and that history with the congregation means a lot. But serving now as an elder, how has that changed the work for you? I'm just that may be of interest to some that are thinking about both roles as a preacher and also an elder.
Well, you have to understand, we always wanted elders.
Yeah.
Some people kind of criticized us because we were doing things, but we didn't have elders. Right. Well, we had a great men's meeting.
Sure.
And but we had local men who didn't meet the qualifications. We had people come through who met the qualifications, but they were only here for 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So I fought being called the pastor of the congregation. I always took things to the men. And any preacher, young or old, who's working with a congregation without elders needs to understand, if somebody asks you something about can they do this or that, you say, I'm one person. Yeah. We'll have to talk to the men. So now we have elders, and it makes it a lot easier than making 12 phone calls just to make one.
Sure.
But it's changed somewhat. Mark Capron and myself are the elders here, and we may sit and discuss things. For when we first were appointed elders, we sat in this office sometimes 6-7 hours at a time, trying to figure out what to do, how to do it. So as far as the work of the congregation, it's made it somewhat easier now that we have elders. I think we were able to get more people who come through looking for a congregation now that we have elders. Most people want to worship in a congregation that has elders, right. Some leadership. So that's helped. That was a drawback not having elders.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it has made the flow of the work, because that's how the Lord planned it. So, but it makes the flow of the work a lot easier, and it helps. At least in my estimation, it seems to help in the sense of when you have elders who are out front leading a congregation, it's easier for folks to follow rather than being without and so forth. And so and it's obviously that's the way the Lord planned for it to be, and so it's certainly a better way. And I know, and you and I have talked about that in the past. I know there's been criticism, but I know you and I have also talked about the fact that who do you go to when you have a delicate situation that you have to handle, and you don't call all 12 men to sometimes deal with certain things that need to be somewhat private, and so that makes that whole dynamic dealing with a men's meeting and things like that difficult. And so, but I'm certainly glad and proud for the congregation here to be able to move forward with that. And I know it's got to make the work a little bit easier. Might make your work as a preacher a little difficult too, so.
I keep wanting to fire one of the preacher, but
I hear you, man. So obviously we're in Southeast Georgia, Richmond Hill, and but what I know of Georgia, especially South Georgia, is it's a mission field. And so if you will, just talk about that just a little bit, so that folks know the area, that this is a work that is in need of help. And this area is certainly in need of help.
Yeah, Richmond Hill is considered one of the larger congregations in the area. And on any given Sunday morning, we'll probably have 70, maybe 80. We were up to 100 before COVID. And I would go to different places, and they would be having classes for small congregations. Mm-hmm. And when I go to the class, they were talking about 150 member congregations, and that's not small.
Yeah.
Right now, I know of 5 or 6 congregations that the average attendance on Sunday morning, I'll say, is 20 or less.
Yeah.
And that's in Southeast Georgia. Richmond Hill is 17 miles south of Savannah. From Macon to Savannah is about a 3-hour drive. There may be possibly now 6 or 7 congregations. Average attendance at those congregations would be somewhere between 10 some of them 5 and 20.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult work down here, partly because there are not a lot of congregations in Southeast Georgia. There's not a lot of money in Southeast Georgia either.
Right.
Some of the counties, you just can't find work. I mean, there's a lot of timber.
Right.
You know, we're blessed to be near Fort Stewart, Fort Hunter. We're blessed to be in near Savannah, so where there's, you know, jobs.
Right.
But you know, there are a lot of places where there are not a lot of jobs, so people come in, they can't find a job, they move on. You know, we reopened the work down at Darien.
Yeah.
That congregation actually was closed. They were about to sell the building. We reopened it. We found a minister. Brother Marty Broom, he baptized probably close to 50 people, if not 50 people, in 15 years. Now, some places they say only 50 people in 15 years.
Yeah.
In South Georgia, that's great work.
Yeah, that is.
However, they couldn't find work, so they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
They're down to about 14 or 15 people. Brother Broom had to leave the work because of health. We've hired a new minister to be the minister for the congregation there, and Brother Glenn Bowman and his wife Nicole are working there now. But there are so many places where there's not a church even.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you go to Baxley, Georgia, which is a pretty good sized town. I don't know what the population is. The congregation closed down. There's not a church there.
Yeah.
In Jessup, there's not a faithful congregation in Jessup, Georgia. Eastman closed its doors. There's 2 or 3 others that have closed since I've been here. And it's not because the people who are there don't work as far as trying to get people to come in. Maybe they don't know exactly how. Maybe there needs to be more teaching on how to evangelize and things like that. But South Georgia is a mission field that needs preachers.
Yeah.
And not only preachers, but we need families to come down and say, hey, you know, I want to help with the work.
Yeah.
We need congregations to say, I'll help with work. I know several congregations where the preacher is having to work 30 and 40 hours outside the congregation, as you've had to before, and still preach. Well, there's no time to really do the work that a preacher needs to do.
Right.
You know, you're lucky to get your sermons together.
Right.
With that many hours out of pocket as far as trying to do the work. You know, but those men, I appreciate those men who are doing that because, you know, they're still there when somebody's sick. They're still there at the hospital when somebody's having surgery. They're doing all those things and still working. And, you know, I think we need to think of that. We think about what could I do to help a congregation like that? Well, what about, you know, my thought on that is, why not pick out a congregation whose preacher's having to do all that and say, hey, would you like to go to polishing the pulpit? You know, we'll send you. Or what about, you know, the lectures at Memphis? We'll send you. If your congregation will let you go, we'll pay your way. Because believe me, the guy who's trying to preach and is having to work all the time, he's struggling.
Yeah.
He's struggling.
So there's a great need in the church, and I'm glad you mentioned too, not just for preachers to come in, but also for families that might be able to come in. You know, and I know that's how the church in Homerville, you know, was planted by having a family come in who was a principal and a school teacher who could work in the school system right there and help plant the congregation in that location. And so we need obviously families to be able to move in and help and encourage, and obviously to have some financial stability for that congregation. A preacher that comes in typically has to raise funds to be able to do any amount of work if he's not working that 40-hour week job. Right. And so that certainly is difficult. I know Cindy has a question for us as well, or for you.
Try to talk. You can hear me through the microphone. I was wondering, so most of the time if someone's visiting Savannah, they usually will come here to worship because because that's it, at least if we are asked, we say go to Richmond Hill.
We appreciate that.
So if they are over in this area, what is something that they could do? Maybe a favorite restaurant of yours or a good seafood restaurant, because we're on the coast, and so people will be looking for seafood. Outside of Savannah, what's your recommendation for a good restaurant that they could go to?
Well, for seafood, I would recommend Love's. However, because of the last hurricane, the hurricane before that, they were flooded.
Oh.
So they're closed for the next few months with about $30,000, $300,000 worth of damage. So it'll take a while for them to get back. But when they get back, I like what the owner said. He said, "Don't give us money. Just come and eat when we get back on our feet." So, the Shell House now is open. It's a great place for seafood. It would be good to come. Wayne had mentioned earlier El Patro's. I'll put in a plug for them because Mexican food. We have, I think we have 3 Mexican restaurants now, but still El Patro's the favorite because it's the one that's been here the longest.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to do in this area. Vacation. If you like history, we have Fort McAllister down the road from the church building. It was a fort. It's an earthen fort, and there's some history there for you. But anyway, there's a lot to do here on the coast.
Yeah. If you have a boat, it's a perfect place.
It is, absolutely.
I don't have a boat, but
I know some people who do. So we can.
Thank you.
Well, and so what we hope is obviously that folks who are coming through the area, maybe they're traveling, stop in, visit Richmond Hill. It's a great family here. And so we hope that you'll come by and encourage them. They will be an encouragement to you, I promise, if you'll stop here. And if you're looking for work to help, any of the works in South Georgia, get in touch with Brother Riley Nelson, and he will give you some direction maybe and get you in touch with the right people. And so thankful for Riley sitting down with us. We'll have all of in the show notes and the description below, we will have all of the information for the Richmond Hill congregation and any other links. And of course, you can find us on YouTube as well as through the Scattered Abroad Network, through the podcast. And so thankful for you tuning in and listening to us. And so we will hope to see you further down the road.